Hey, what's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Brooks Glycerin Max. I gotta say, these ones definitely take the prize for feeling exactly like they look. Let's get into it. Now, of course, there are pros and cons all the way through the Brooks Glycerin Max, but I do want to throw out one number, 84.4, and that is the number of degrees these things heated up on the breathability test. And for a shoe with uppers that are this plush and comfortable, that is pretty amazing. Typically, you're only getting that in the really, really thin super shoes that are trying to take down weight, making those super open pore mesh uppers. These are multi-material woven uppers with a ton of chunky padding in the tongue, as well as around the heel counter. I mean, it's not super padded, but it does have a really thick ring around the heel counter and the ankle collar. You do get a runner's knot in these, and the lace line is reinforced, which is nice. I did notice, though, if I used the runner's knot or if I didn't, I still had about moderate amount of heel slippage. So I would use the runner's knot, like I said, because the tongue is so padded. The one thing about the tongue is there is no gusset. And since this shoe was really not trying to dump weight, I'm not sure why they didn't just put a gusset in there. I think a higher gusset would have actually helped a lot with the heel slip. So I'd say that was the biggest con about the uppers, because the comfort is definitely there. The breathability is definitely there. The moisture management is definitely there. You look at the breathability mapping, fog is just pouring out of these things. So yeah, I mean, I think with one little small tweak, you actually would have had something. You actually do get some foxing with the Brooks logo. It is melded into the midsole there. So yeah, that's nice, a little bit more reinforcement. Look at these things on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Yeah, I mean, the burr does start to work through that upper layer of upper, but it does not get through the underside, which is nice. You do have an underside drag guard for your toenails, which always helps. So, I mean, you're not taking these through thick brush anyway. So really, in terms of durability to blunt containment, I think it kind of depends on what kind of runner you are, which we'll talk about in the runnability section. But getting back to what I was saying at the beginning of the video, looking at these on the teardown and honestly just feeling them on foot, these were one of the first shoes that, look like these crazy moon shoes. That actually felt like one too. This one, and ironically the Puma All Pro Nitro, which is a basketball shoe, really the only two shoes you look at them and to me they feel like what they look like. These ones felt like moon shoes. They had tension under them. Like you really felt like they were springing. You felt like you were as high off the ground as they look in them, which I guess kind of is a good or a bad thing depending on who you talk to. Now you look at this thing in the rear foot and you've got that DNA tuned foam, which is a lot more low density in the heel, and you get the higher density, that yellow foam going into the forefoot. Now you do have the higher density foam right underfoot in the heel, but it is cased with that lower density foam. Now this is EVA. It's just nitrogen infused EVA. And then these two slabs of foam are actually melded together in the foaming process instead of gluing them together. That is supposed to reduce the glue in the shoe, and it's supposed to reduce the environmental impact of the shoe, which I think is awesome, but also it's just supposed to make the shoe kind of, run smoother for longer because there's not that glue in the middle that could have issues. That's also nice. But what I noticed about this foam is it doesn't feel super violent on the push-off. It doesn't feel like the Alpha Flies, the Vapor Flies, or the Evos. It more feels like you've got an air mattress underneath of you. That's what these feel like. Now, these don't have a shank, and honestly, I honestly think they could use something akin to a shank, which, like I said, we'll talk about in the runnability section, but more in the rear foot because the rear foot is kind of unstable. Look at this thing on the bounce height test. Got 35 centimeters in the rear foot, 35 in the forefoot, which that's what we're used to seeing with EVAs, right? Like Nike Phylon, Cushlon actually gets a little bit higher, but that's not what you're seeing with thermoplastics. Thermoplastic foams, like in more super shoes, you're seeing them get up into high 30s, mid 40s, and sometimes even into the 50s if it's combined with Zoom Air. So the foam does act like an EVA, just like I said, much more tension-filled EVA, if that makes sense, right? Just a super high tensile EVA, but also because it's lower density, it's blown with nitrogen, it does have that more airy feeling, so akin to an air mattress. But getting into the rear foot, you basically just have this wave pattern. In the rear foot, you got two pods, and in the forefoot, you've got these channels under there. And you got exposed foam, both lower density and the higher density foam. And like I said, those tread channels just, kind of allow a little bit better grip while not having to have as much rubber. This rubber is micro-gridded though, which means each piece of rubber also has a little bit of a micro-grid stamping. Should aid in a little bit more grip on these. Honestly, I mean, I found them fine. I actually took these on road as well as off-road, which I wouldn't recommend. But in terms of road running, they definitely do have a very smooth transition if you're the right runner, which we'll talk about in the runnability section. But suffice to say, in terms of grip, Really not bad. Look at these things on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Yeah, about a millimeter of damage on this. I mean, the durometer comes in at 11.5, so it is a little bit softer rubber. Although I think for how these are going to be used and how chunky the individual treads of rubber are, honestly, I don't think this is going to do too bad in terms of durability, unless you're somebody with a really bad pronatory twist, and I think you probably will start rubbing through the rubber, as well as you might start introducing some issues with the foam. But looking at the speed ratio, the Glycerin Max comes in at a 2.95, no shank, so no bump from the shank score. Honestly, I think that's where they belong. I don't think these really belong in the same category as, some of the more like elite speed focused shoes. To me, these are much more meant as a comfortable trainer, right? These are much more meant as a comfort shoe, almost like a jogging shoe. And yeah, for that, they are quick. And for me, I honestly, personally, I really like these, but that's my own personal opinion. But in terms of a speed focused shoe, I guess for a daily trainer, sure. They're or for a jogging shoe, yeah, they're quick, and for their profile, right? They are quick, but just don't expect them to be rocket ships either. But getting into what is by far my favorite part of the Glycerin Max is its fit. These things only have an 8-degree inflare, which is super mellow, 28.8-degree length, and then a metatarsal width of 9.9 centimeters, and a toe box width of 11 centimeters, and a toe box taper of only 22 degrees. These things are super forgiving shoes. And so really, if you're a narrow or medium foot, honestly, if you want the weight reduction, as long as you're not long-toed, long-footed, I think you can go down a half size. The heel to toe drop, I think, is fine if you're long arched. That's not a problem. But in terms of, I'd say a 2E and 4E, to me, I'd just go true to size just so you can lock these in. Because for me, these broke in like a dream. They were super buttery. The one thing I will say, though, is for the snake bitten foot, any lumps, bumps, bruises, issues you might have with your running, that's where you're going to get some issues because the rear foot is so unstable. You better be a midfoot or forefoot striker. Distal midfoot strikers to midfoot is probably the best phase. I guess we'll get into the runnability section while we're doing the fit because that kind of ties into it. If you're a heel striker on these, I was rolling left and right when I was trying to heel strike on these, and I was really paying attention because I knew that I was going to be unstable. The foam in the rear foot is just not meant for somebody with ankle instability. It just isn't, and you're so high off the ground that your proprioception just isn't going to kick in. Even though the foam is very, very airy and light, and you would think you could get a lot of tactile sensation through them, you just don't. And so if you're a midfoot striker, yes, they are a lot more stable. Are they the most stable things on planet Earth? No, because you can almost slide off of them because the uppers aren't super containing, and no, uppers don't stop ankle sprains, but the combination of this midsole and the uppers. So, if you're a more stable runner, they're fine, and it's hard to lock an orthotic in these. That's the other thing. If they're low profile, you got a custom there that's a really low profile orthotic. Yeah, for sure, you can lock that in, no problem. And especially if you're a narrow or medium foot, and you can go down that half size and lock in better, sure, then they're going to do fine for you. I would say for somebody with heel pain, ball of foot pain, they're great while they're new. Once they start to break down, you may start to get a little bit of that micro motion in there. They may start to get a little bit too squishy, especially in the rear foot. I think if you're a distal midfoot striker and you have heel pain, I think they're fine. And while they're new, or if you're a lighter runner, keeping them new is like a light jogger, then I think they're okay. They're so bulky in the midfoot that they do stay pretty stable. But like I said, they do have a nice forefoot rocker on them, so they are a little bit easier to get off the ground when you're midfoot striking. To me, like I said, a heel striker is a no-go. A forefoot striker is okay in these. I think the uppers maybe a little bit less containing for a forefoot striker. So I'd say in that midfoot striking range, I think is where you do your best work. Like I said, just watch out for the rear foot. And so speaking of that rear foot profile, that brings me right into today's sponsor, which is Ortholite, which coincidentally might be the brand of insole you actually have in your shoes right now. It's probably a good chance. Now, the Brooks Glycerin Max, they're meant for road running. They're meant for more consistent running conditions because the stack is so high. And even though Brooks uses Ortholite insoles to create a more consistent underfoot feeling with the open cell polyurethane, which Ortholite is basically perfected at this point, other companies that are doing more trail and hiking shoes also use Ortholite to more give you that consistent feeling underfoot and that consistent comfort underfoot when you're either running or hiking over very, very inconsistent conditions. Say you're out in Arizona and you're hiking over some baby heads, right, and your foot is moving all over the place, or different conditions, say up in the Northeast where you got roots and trees, just all kind of debris on the ground. Companies like Danner, Garmont, and Solomon all trust Ortholite to create insoles that give you a consistent underfoot feel, which means from when that shoe is at 0 miles to 500, the underfoot feel of that shoe feels identical and identically comfortable as well. And even though you might be putting these shoes in really, really treacherous conditions, maybe extreme heat or extreme cold, the temperature regulation of the Ortholite combined with the consistent underfoot feel will give you that much more of an edge when the conditions get really, really unpredictable. So whether you're on completely flat ground just going for a PR, or you're deciding to run or hike through rocks, roots, rivers, and streams, I'll say that 5 times fast, you will get that same consistent underfoot feel with an Ortholite insole. So make sure to take out the insole of your shoe and see if the Ortholite logo is on there, because if it is, you are in for a pretty smooth ride. All right, let's get on with the Brooks Glycerin Max. And so, yeah, I mean, with myself becoming a little bit more of a midfoot striker over the last few years, these things just fit right into my wheelhouse. So if I were in the market for a shoe right now, yeah, honestly, I might be getting another pair of these right now because they fit me so well. Are they gonna fit everybody? No. And you really could have made the rear foot a lot more stable, either just by putting in maybe just a little bit of an external heel counter in these. I mean, the internal heel counter on them is decently stable, but you also could do what Nike did with the old Pegasus, right, the 39, I believe, and just put just a really small stabilizer, you know, almost put like a quasi shank in the rear foot, just keep the rear foot a little bit more stable. Honestly, I think that would have done wonders for the rest of the shoe too, right, just keeping it a little bit more stable, even for a midfoot or a forefoot striker. Even if it was bottom loaded, you know, there's a lot you could do to make the rear foot stable. Now, I get it that this shoe is just not meant for that. And so, yeah, a lot of people aren't going to care, myself included. I don't care. I mean, this would be fine for me for a running shoe. Don't expect these to be a good walking shoe, though, because going through a traditional walking gait cycle, it's not going to happen. I was sinking into oblivion with them as I was walking them, because I know a lot of people are going to see this, see the stack, and think these might be good walking shoes. To me, just wasn't the best. And honestly, I actually really had to get used to forefoot striking in these. I know some people are going to go into this right away, no problem. You know, they're used to this, you know, forefoot rocker, this angle of ascent in the forefoot. To me, kind of had to get used to it a little bit more because I felt like I was just kind of driving into the shoe. So, like I said, to me, this is a midfoot striker's dream. Just don't try to put a bulky orthotic in them. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, especially if you're like me, found a really good friend in these, or if you didn't. I'd love to know, like I said, in the comments. And if you want to see what Nike's up to with the brand new Pegasus Plus, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect, Jarbur, and Foam. I'll see you somewhere in the sneakerverse.